What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I am Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Yakuza Kiwami. Go back, look at this gem of a game. As I said in the last video, I'm a newfound Yakuza fan. Played 0. I want to do this in chronological order, so I played 0 and then jumped into this game. And as I said back then, I'll look at the rankings online, all this stuff, and 0 is oftentimes looked at as the best one of these games, which is great. And to me, that's awesome. I played the game. I absolutely love the game. But then also, it's a little bit daunting, right? Because you look at all the games to come, the spin-offs like Judgment and all that stuff, and all right, well, I played the best one first, so does it kind of go downhill from here? And Kiwami suffers from some things, and I would say when this game is firing on all cylinders, and I want to talk about it in this video, it's just as good. It's on the same kind of ground as 0. I really, really do believe that. So this game, obviously being a remake of the original, I believe the original came out in 2005, and this jump-started the franchise. So I got to think back, right? You got to think back to a struggling Sega, and if you kind of know the history, which I went back to, it's like, okay, what was it like back then? How did this game come about? There's some really good videos of what was kind of put on the line to make this series. A lot of people didn't have a lot of confidence in this series, right? It was very different for the time and just for what this kind of game was going for, and it worked. Smash hit, and it saved a couple people's jobs. It also maybe even just saved Sega as a company, period. And obviously, it jump-started an entire franchise that yearly releases, prequels, remakes, remasters, spin-offs, like all of this stuff, right? All came from this one game. So you got to put it into that context, right? I got to kind of remember it, because a lot of the things I would say negative about this game, like it's not being fully fleshed out, maybe would be kind of an overarching theme. Is it too hard? Is it too hard maybe to say that kind of thing? Yes, this is a remake, and this came out, years and years and years later, and it looks phenomenal. And I believe it's a really great game, but it's lacking in some departments. But yet again, I just played a prequel that came out. I mean, if you go back to the original Yakuza 1, prequel came out years and years later. You're able to reform everything, right? The gameplay, it's extremely similar. There's some things, obviously, in Yakuza 0 that are just like Yakuza Kiwami, or I guess Yakuza, just the original game. There's a lot of copycatting, and I would imagine as this series continues on, the core of it is the same, and then it's all the additional things. Honestly, some of these things were helpful to me. So what I mean by this, side missions. So in 0, there's 100, right? I believe there's 100, and then there is split between Majima and Kiryu. And so you do half and half, and they're really good. They're detailed. They're very diverse, not just, I guess, from each other, but also from the base game. You really feel like you're doing some different things when you do those side missions. Pro and con with Kiwami, or I guess the first, Yakuza game. When you do the side missions, well, number one, there's less of them. I think there's like 74 or 75. So there's, 25% less immediately, which I don't necessarily mind. They're also a lot simpler. A lot. Everything kind of resolves itself in one thing. So you meet a person, you talk to the person, you do something with that person, or you defend them against an enemy group, and then you have like one final talk with them, and the scene is over. A large amount of them are very simple. Now, there's pros and cons to that, right? Honestly, the base story of this game is incredibly good. And again, I think when it's at its best, it's just as good as 0. And I also was playing these games back to back. So, you're fighting. It's the same basic fighting. I'm getting a little tired of it. I'm going to take a little bit of a break before I do Kiwami 2. But, you're doing the same thing. It's still a lot of fun. There's some amazing set pieces and a little bit of variety, right? But it's like, all right, I want to get to the meat and potatoes. What really makes these games tick? It's the story, it's the characters, right? I mean, that's kind of a unanimous opinion of this series. The story is so good, so let's get to it. So on one hand, it's like, well, they're not as deep. They don't really make me want to play the side missions. But on the other side of things, when I do play the side missions, they're concise. They don't overstay their welcome. They get in, they get out. You get some experience points. You do what you learn a kind of unique, like different story, and then you go back to what you were doing, like the better. I would argue the better part of the game, and I honestly think that's kind of fine. So while that would maybe be a negative, in some ways it's actually a positive. The only other things I can probably think of in terms of negatives is it's repetitive for, Zero, but it's because I played them back to back, right? I mean, it's kind of my own personal experience. I will say this. There's a lot of fetch quests in this game. I believe it was a main mission where you had to get like fake documents, like a fake ID almost. And the idea was that you would go to this one girl because she would give you something for somebody else. Then she would say, okay, well, I need this first, so go get me that. Okay, so you go get them that. You go, you find something, you go back, then she tells you something else that she could have told you the first time, then you go another place, then you do something, and you just bounce back and forth and back and forth. There's not a lot of substance when you get there. And that, I would honestly argue, that was the biggest weakness of this entire game. But yet again, I got to think, 2005, how deep are some of these quests? They're not all that deep, right? A lot of these are go from point A to point B, talk to somebody, they'll tell you to go to the next place, you go. You may not even fight in between. You may just go to a location, find out you have to go somewhere else, go to that somewhere else. Maybe you have to go back to a location you were just at. Maybe there's no fighting anywhere in that sequence, and that's the quest. And that stuff is very annoying, but it's very, I'd argue, like 2005, right? Like you have to think about that era. But beyond that, this game is awesome. For some of the reasons that Zero was, but also for other reasons. Like seeing Majima and knowing, because, back in the day, you see him for the first time here. You don't know what happened in Zero. So knowing his backstory and knowing kind of, how he became this and now what he is, he's such a cool character. Now, I likened him to the Joker. My friend said he's more of like a Deadpool. I'll have to see how they kind of treat him throughout the, the franchise. But for me, just seeing him, specifically like the first time you see him, he's got that friendly touch where he's kind of like egging you on throughout the entire game, like he just wants to fight you. He goes out of his way to do things to get you to him so you can fight. He doesn't let other people fight you or at least kill you, right? He needs to be the one to do it. He screams Joker to me, but maybe, again, like his evolution maybe will change a little bit, but I love it. I love his laugh. I love his Kiri-chan, like when he kind of like just like screams it out, top of his lungs, or just with so much kind of energy, right? He's a great fun ride, I guess. Anytime you see the man, he's really, really cool. And then Kiryu himself, he's awesome. I mean, this is a guy that in this game, I mean, like he's got it kind of all figured out in the beginning, right? I love the arcs that this game will take you, and even just, I'd say maybe the pacing, but like it starts out, you're introduced. Again, you got to think if this is your first time playing it, you figure out who this guy is. He's kind of got everything. He's making a lot of money. He's in a position of power. He's got a lot of respect. Everybody knows of him, like all this stuff. And then things just start happening. I wanted to kind of figure out when making these videos on this channel, like how am I going to approach them? Are there going to be spoilers? I do want to spoil this. So if you've never played this game before, well, do yourselves a favor and play this game. And if you have played this game, we'll continue to talk about the highlights. So, immediately with Dojima, because we just saw so much of him. Now, again, like I feel like you'd have a different feel of, well, number one, you have no idea what's going on, right? Because he's holding the gun, and you're like, did he kill this man? Because it doesn't really seem like him. But yet again, you wouldn't know that, I guess, necessarily, right? If this is the first time you've played it, you'd quickly find out, I think, right? But if this is the first time, but because you know the prequel and you know this relationship, I mean, it's not a great relationship, but you know it between these two, you know where they stand. It's like, number one, you're killing him immediately in this game, which I didn't know. I mean, I'm so clueless on anything that happens in this game. I didn't know Haruka, like, at all. I didn't know Yumi. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had a sense that Yumi and Nishiki weren't going to make it in, like, future games. But, again, this is spoilers. We're jumping to it. I didn't know they would die. I didn't know they would die in this game, right? Nishiki is such a great character in Zero. And then in this game, I mean, he goes wild. I like the arc. I don't know how much they, like, betrayed his character almost, like, retroactively, right? Because I think it all makes sense how he did it in this game. Like, if you just watch this game and everybody's talking about him behind his back, he's a loser. Like, he's a loser who doesn't really deserve his position, but he has it. He has power, but not really. He gets stepped on, and then the switch just flips, right? And he's all in. And I love that, and I think that makes so much sense. But then I think to, like, that brotherhood that they had in Zero, and again, I guess it enhances it in a lot of ways, because it's like these two are sworn brothers, and they love each other, and Nishiki would do anything. He had talked about in Zero that, like, if you kill, I kill, like we're going to do it together. Like, I don't want you to go down that road. I haven't gone down that road. Like, it's just such a good bond. And then but then he loses himself. But yet again, you got to think like 10 years, I believe, right? In between Zero and then Kiwami. And then it's another 10 years that Kiryu is in jail. So it's 20 years from the things that we saw in Zero to, the modern day when Nishiki's lost it, right? And he's evil or whatever you want to call him. It's been 20 years. So you can change a lot in 20 years. So I do understand it. And I think in some ways it enhances it. But he's a great character. I love that arc. I love his ending. I love his, I guess, in a way, sacrifice, right? Like, he gets beat the heck out of, and he kind of realizes, or I don't know. I don't know if he fully realizes it, I guess, but he realizes it enough where it's like, I'm taking this guy out, I'm going to try, maybe I'm protecting them, maybe I'm not, and we're just going to do this. And it was crazy. That was crazy. When Yumi was shot, my jaw dropped. My jaw dropped because I mean, Yumi is not in this game all that much, and I guess this is the only time that you see her throughout the series. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because I don't know. But she's awesome. I mean, and the love that Kiryu has for her, it's so good. And then you have her daughter who sees it. And I would just like to say, let me just throw this out here. The scene where she gets shot is one of the most creative and awesome camera works that you could ever do. I did get a sense that Yumi was going to jump in front of the bullet. Like, I thought that, because he's going to shoot Kiryu, and then Haruka kind of, goes in front of him. And it's like, there's no way she gets shot and she dies here. And then, they do the gunshot, and it's a close-up on Haruka's face, right? And then the camera pulls out. It pulls out where you then see Yumi's in front of her. So it does a very, like, it wouldn't, I don't even know if it would necessarily work in like live action. A game works really, really well where, maybe you expect it, but they do a really good job of hiding it. And then Yumi gets shot. And it's so tough because, like, we've talked about the simplicity, even though it's so complicated with all these families all fighting for control. And then this one, right? Like the chairman, Sarah, right? He dies, and it's all about just gaining power. And there's 10 billion, yen stolen. So it's a money thing. They're looking for the money, but they're also looking for control of like the entire thing. It's deep. And then you get into, a guy who's into like the politics of everything, right? Like, it kind of goes into collusion and all this stuff. It's deep. But again, at its core, it's, chairman was murdered, money stolen. There's this daughter. She's connected to Yumi somehow through, their aunts and niece, right? So you have all that going on. You have Kiryu out of jail. He's just trying to like figure it out. Kazuma, right? Like all this stuff. It's not too it's much like Zero. At the end of the day, it's not really that complicated. But then if you get into the weeds, that's when it gets more complicated. But it does it very intelligently. Like, it's a very, very smart thing that they're doing. And, I'm spending so much time, by the way, talking about the story because that's the bread and butter. There's some amazing cutscenes. There's some amazing cinematic moments where different families are fighting each other. There's some cool fight scenes just in general. The Nishiki fight, I think, in general, actually is a really cool, like, boss fight, let's say, right? But again, it's the same general combat that I just experienced with Zero. It's serviceable. And maybe that's going to be something that I say for all these games. And, that's just the way I'm going to approach them, where I'm going in expecting story and characters, and boy, did I get it here. Gameplay, just get me through it. Just, have enough diversity, even though it's going to get repetitive, right? Side missions here and there, activities here and there. That is a thing that this game is lacking, right? There's not a lot of, like, darts or pool or stuff like that. It's really, I think, just the Sega store, right, with, like, the crane machines and stuff. There's that kind of stuff, but it's limited. But again, it's the first game in the franchise. It's the mid-2000s. Just give me the story. And I thought, honestly, again, from start to finish, it was extremely strong. And for part of it, it's a little bit of like a murder mystery from certain people's angles. It's a game of who can you trust, like who knows what, and where's Yumi, right? It's a game of a daughter searching for, I guess, her aunts, or technically she was searching for her mom to find out her mom is Yumi. Just small things like that, too. Like, I actually fell for that. I will be flat honest. I fell for Yumi had, like, a twin sister, like, that whole thing. I fell for it. I was like, oh, that makes sense, I suppose. And then when they said, no, she is Yumi, it's like, oh, my God, you got me. I did fall for it, and that's okay. But I love this game. I do. I love this franchise so much. So let me know what you all think about this game. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on. I will be covering the rest of them, but I, of course, cover many other games as well. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all on the next one.